Hello, fellow metalheads. I'm joining the YouTube world. This is the first video I'm putting out. Just going to rank some of my favorite groups' albums, which ones are my favorites. I see that's a trend these days, and I just thought I'd throw my opinion into the ring. What made me do it is I see a lot of guys putting opinions in, and some of the albums I'm not really agreeing with. It seems like they're leaving out a lot of the early stuff in a lot of the opinion polls and best ofs, so I just think that a lot of the earlier stuff needs more mention, and this is just my opinion. It's all done for fun. Give you a little, on this video I'm going to give you a little background on myself, won't bore you. On the subsequent videos I release, ranking different bands, I'm not going to go through all this, but I was born in '67, really started listening to metal in '83. I didn't do a lot in my youth except waste time listening to metal and doing the noon parking lot lunch things that all high schoolers do, and just immersing myself in music. Back in those days, there were no internet or any kind of those things to figure out all what's going on in the music world. We'd go to tape and record shops and we'd read magazines like Kerrang. My buddy used to get Kerrang magazine and I'd borrow it, and that's how we learned, kind of hit and miss. Sometimes we'd just go somewhere and if an album cover looked good, we might buy it. Not always the best way to go about things, but good story there. We bought Metallica Ride the Lightning just because of the album cover. Never heard of the group Metallica. This is back in '83, right in that era. Took it out and listened to it. Of course, we were blown away, Trapped Under Ice and all that good stuff. So once in a while it works. But like I said, I'm old school. Kind of came in on the cutting edge of it. I know Priest and some of them started out in the late '70s, the true metal, but kind of riding the wave of the early '80s. That was my high school years, '81 to '85. And basically lived my life for learning more about heavy metal and classic rock. So if I have a PhD in anything, I guess it'd be metal. One of the few things I know a lot about. And this is an opinion thing just for fun. I'm not big on making comments back, but I'd love to see what you guys leave me and how you guys differ in your opinions. Without further ado, I'm going to start out with Iron Maiden, one of my very favorite groups of all time, and I see a lot of things being done on Iron Maiden these days. And I'm just going to list my top four. I was going to call it Fantastic Four, but I thought I might get copyright infringement, so I'm just going to call it my favorite four. And I'm going to start out with number 4, and that for me is Killers. Of course, a Di'Anno album. And let me just say right here that this isn't Metal 101. I'm not trying to say I like this because of the riff or that because of the lyric or this solo's great or this particular song. I'll go into a little bit of explanation, but this is more for you journeyman metalers that were out there since the beginning. I'm kind of wanting to see if your opinion matches up close to mine or if maybe you had a completely different view. But starting out with Killers, like I said, a Di'Anno album, great from front to back, a lot of great songs on there. Speaks for itself, you guys know what the songs are. I rank an album not by its musicianship necessarily, although that's part of it, but how much does it move you? I heard a buddy say to me once, the situation you were in, the place you were at when you heard a certain album, that makes a big difference. For me, Killers was one of those where I was at a certain place in time in my life and I heard it and it really moved me. And I think it's a wonderful album. Di'Anno's second best. That might give it away a little bit, huh? What's coming on up the list, but we're not going to get too serious here, are we, fellas? Um, Moving on up, number 3, Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast. Great album. Probably a lot of you guys' favorites. Thought the album was stellar. And the song, for you guys that were there back in the day, that got the most radio airplay was, of course, Run to the Hills. In my opinion, probably the worst song on the album, and it's a great song. Once again, worst song on the album, great song. What's that say about the rest of the album? You could chuck Running to the Hills right off to the side and you still have my 3rd favorite album. Because I think all the songs on it are better than that. Great album, Dickinson's debut. Hard to beat. There's a couple that can beat it, in my opinion. And when you go up to number 2, this is very close to number 1. Difficult call on my part, but once again, circumstances that I listened to these albums in. I remembered the circumstances and how much they moved me at the time. And number 2, I've got to go with Peace of Mind. Great album, powerful. Flight of Icarus, on and on, etc. Like I said, you journeyman metal guys, you don't need to be told what's on the album. You don't need to be told the running order of the album, the chorus or the lyrics. You're all pretty familiar with it. Peace of Mind, great album, a real rocker. What could beat it? Well, how about the debut album, Iron Maiden, self-titled. The first Di'Anno album with Iron Maiden, the first Iron Maiden album. My second favorite album of all time, let's just forget Iron Maiden for a minute. My second favorite album of all time. When you put that album in, you crank it, you're on a back road somewhere, wasting time. Guys, let's travel back to the 80s. Are you with me? How much did that album move you the first time you heard it? How much does it move you to this day? How much did it stand the test of time? Iron Maiden, debut album, Paul Di'Anno. Notice I bookended them. Paul Di'Anno, a couple Bruce Dickinsons, another Paul Di'Anno. What else is strange there? Best 4 albums? The first 4 albums. That's old school, but that's the way I look at it. I see so many guys putting Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son, some of the later albums, which I'm very familiar with. Listen to them regularly. Got a feel for them. First 4 albums are head and shoulders above what came after it. I'm sorry. Somewhere in Time is the closest album to hold a candle to the rest of them. Power Slave, maybe after that, but those first 4 I mentioned, they just can't be beat, as far as I'm concerned. Anxious to see you guys' opinion on this. Like I said, I'm 53, just doing this for fun. Wanted to put my opinion out there. Anxious to see what some of you old timers think of my list. Some of you old schoolers who like the early stuff. And you guys that came in later and maybe like the old school stuff. A lot of my lists that are coming up are going to have a lot of debut albums on them. Spoiler alert. Because a lot of up-and-coming bands back in the day, that's when they were trying their hardest. It might be a little raw, it might not be so polished, but the power and the emotion's there. And I think that's what you had with the first Iron Maiden. Paul Di'Anno at his best. He was never any greater after that, in my opinion. That's the way I look at it. Like I said, my second favorite album of all time. And I'm just going to release these short little videos. I'm going to rank top 4 albums of all of my favorite classic rock, heavy metal groups. And anxious to hear you guys' opinion. I will occasionally comment back. But really just very receptive to hear maybe what some of you guys thought when you first heard the album, where you were, how it made you feel. You know, I was high school 81 to 85. There was a lot of metal going on back then. And Maiden was one of the top groups that I loved. I devoted a lot of time and effort into learning their albums, learning the lyrics, the band members. You know, it's a big part of my life back then. Along with wasting time, fellas, although that doesn't happen so much anymore. Let me know what you think. Old school to old school. Have a good night.